You're listening to the Paul and Philippe podcast. Prepare yourself for loads of unbiased nuances.
And somehow you really had success in achieving that, especially because, for example, at the crisis of 2008, 2009,
Mm.
Brazil was recognized, for example, because it went through a period in which Brazil also had a quite extraordinary level of development. In terms of GDP, a consolidation of economy, and successes, let's say, recognized successes, and was of the few economies, big economies, that was not very, or let's say, hit that much by the 2008, 2009 crisis, which at the time made Obama call him the guy, and somehow asked him in very formal meetings they had in some dinner or whatever other gathering, and that what was his secret? How did Brazil go through the crisis without having to face a recession, etc.? So there was a recognition of the importance of Lula. Lula has this charisma.
So you perceive
Yes.
that his way of diversifying his international relations and also obviously his economic traits, which always come with the international relations, was one of the reasons why Brazil was, let's say, relatively small hit by the economic crisis 2008, 2009.
I would say not necessarily. I would have another understanding, even though, let's say that the crisis, at least the financial crisis, was very, very specific in terms of sector. It was in the real estate sector of the United States,
The subprime
and the
crisis.
involvement of many big banks,
Mm.
European banks, American banks, Japanese banks, into the financing of those activities. And when the real estate bubble exploded, then those financial institutions suffered immediately the consequences uh, of this crisis. But the Brazilian banking sector was very, very, had almost no involvement with this
I see.
peculiar activity because they already had a lot of money to make on the Brazilian territory and did not have that amount of capital in order to be very present on the Brazilian market and at the same time investing uh, in large amounts in other markets, even especially if it's to earn less money than you would on the Brazilian market. So the financial sector was not pretty much hit by the 2008-2009 crisis. The economic crisis that followed,
Mhm.
the financial crisis, obviously had more impact because the big clients, for example, in terms of exports for Brazil, are the big economies, whether the United States and Europe. At the time, they were their biggest destination of exports. Today, it's different. Today, it's China dominating the agenda in terms of economy. But at the time, it was the traditional developed countries. So obviously, at the moment that those countries enter in a recession, it has a negative impact on the local economy. But even though it was far from being a recession, let's say that the country in 2008, 2009 just grew around 0%, something like that. It did not even have a diminution in the rhythm of growth. And that's why there was this recognition that the Brazilian economy was a strong economy, a reliable economy, etc. These sentiments, these assessments will change in the decade, the decade, the 2010 decade. And then Brazil is going to go through one of its worst economic crises in decades. And these assessments made at the end of the first decade of the 21st century was then reassessed. But at the time, it had reached the top. So it was being not only participating, but being heard, listened to by most of the other authorities or very famous authorities in the world.
Would you say,
And, mhm.
would you say this was because of Lula or in spite of Lula?
No, I would say it was because of